Welcome everyone to this webinar about demand planning benchmarks, where I will show you live how you can assess which models work well for your own business and your own data, how you can see what kind of accuracy they provide for baseline demand planning forecasting, and also I will talk about a maturity assessment that you can execute with partner companies as well. Now, with Horizon Solutions, we support companies that are planning in spreadsheets, and we help them to go to a new, intelligent, and collaborative way of planning in one integrated platform. That means end-to-end planning. So demand planning, inventory optimization, capacity and production planning, all the way to distribution planning and detailed scheduling. So we allow planners to collaborate with other departments to get their insights into the plan and also to make use of advanced modeling techniques for demand planning, as well as optimization techniques that are easily configurable for each business. My name is Ben van Delm, based out of Belgium, one of the two co-founders of Horizon Solutions. Chinmen Arwan is the other co-founder. He is responsible for the product. And we, as well as our advisors, we've seen how most companies make it quite complex to get insights into your demand planning and how difficult it is to set up a demand planning system as well. So we wanted to change that radically. That's why we created this demand scan. So I'm really excited to show this to you all today in a live demo. And I also want to say thanks to our development team for making this possible, because I think it's really something unique and very powerful for each business. Now, the demand scan, running it, will take about 10 minutes. So what I will do in this webinar is first put the process in motion where you can see it, and then I will explain what's actually being done, okay? While we wait for the demand scan to finish, I will also explain the maturity assessment framework that you can use and the value of it. And then we will walk through the demand scan results together. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, in the Q&A. We will have time in the end, or maybe even during the webinar, to cover those. As I mentioned in the beginning, the webinar is recorded, so don't worry if you have some urgency. You will get the recording afterwards in any case. Okay, with that, let's get started. So the demand scan process, let's put it in motion. So here, I hope you can all see my other screen, which is the actual Horizon environment, where I will upload the correct master data files to put the process in motion. Like I mentioned, I will explain in just a bit once I've uploaded these what I'm actually doing. I first want to make sure that I do this correctly, get the right files in here, as well as transactional files, the actual sales history in this case. This will take a bit longer to actually upload. So here what I'm doing for this company, very briefly uploading their master data. So all of the items, so all of the products that they have, all of that information, what kind of identifiers do they have, all of their customer information, and also from where they ship or sell their products. And then the sales history file, I think for this company is about a couple of 100,000 order lines that I'm also uploading, which the models will then actually be able to learn from to create a demand plan and also to see what kind of baseline accuracy is possible with different models. Okay, so this has uploaded as well. Now let me put the process in motion. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, this is running a couple of different steps that will happen to set up the demand scan, as well as actually creating a full demand plan, which I will also show you in the end. But let's go back and let me explain to you what I've just done. So what we need to create that baseline forecast is, like I said, the master data. So if you look at this here, what I'm showing here, this is 3 different types of information. The left-hand columns until column F, that is all of the information about their products, about the individual SKUs, their unique identifiers, but also information like categories or attributes that these products have, which is useful if in the future you want to forecast for a similar product and you want to look at attributes of a similar product. So that kind of information I've uploaded. Second, I've uploaded the customer information. So who are we actually selling to? This can be in different channels, but it needs to, again, have that unique identifier for each customer. And then third, we have that location information, which is from where are we actually selling or shipping that product. Because if you're doing demand planning, you need to know these three crucial things. Which product are you selling, to whom, from where, at which moment in time? And so this provides the structure for the system to understand the business. Typically, companies have this information in their ERP system. They might have it in their master data, or this can sometimes just be in different Excel files. Okay, so irrespective of the current structure in which you have it, you can actually upload that in our system, which I'll show you in a bit. Now, the sales data that I uploaded, that is the full sales history, the actual historical order lines that we just put in the system. We don't need to know about monthly volumes, weekly volumes. Ideally, we just get the individual order lines, and the data transformation and all of the following steps are executed within the platform automatically. So what that means is, again, that unique product or item identifier. Where are you selling this from, or where are you shipping it from? So it can be a country, it can be a warehouse, a DC, doesn't matter. And then the customer that you're actually shipping it to. So again, that can be a customer ID, it can maybe be a channel. You can also determine that yourself. Of course, we need to know about the ship quantity and then the ship date. This might be ship date, selling date, the exact naming or exact date that you're using here. Yeah, that's up to you. So while it's running, I'm not going to show this in the platform, but in the platform itself, there is also this flexibility for different data formats. So we allow the company or every user to just map their own data into this structure. So I showed you that I uploaded those files, but before that, you can also just download a template. And that template can be set according to your own data set. So what you see here is the mapping of those fields. You might have different dimensions, different naming conventions. So you can just enter those in the platform. And after that, you can upload your files accordingly, and the system will understand that directly. Sometimes this is not completely clear for people. So that's no problem. We also can just support in setting this up. It's very simple for us to do just that. So as we come back to the platform, we see that this is still running. Demand scan is fine, but it's actually now doing the full demand planning setup, which we will also still wait for. While we wait for that, I want to touch on the demand planning process more broadly, and also outline the scope of what this demand scan is and is not doing. Okay, this is not a finalized plan as such that a company might use. Some companies might want that, just a baseline, but ideally you go through different other steps as well. So these different steps are typically in a process that companies want to set up, or how it's run often is you have your historical data. From that, you want to generate that baseline. And to do that, you need to transform that data. You need to look at which models are you going to use, how do you need to tune them exactly for your business. A time and effort intensive process typically. And you also want to test those on different levels of your product customer location hierarchy. Are you going to forecast at the highest level or at the SKU level? And then you're going to test it at, if you do it at the highest level, what kind of forecast do you get at all of the underlying item levels? So that's initially the work that's being done. It might be by a demand planner or by somebody else, a data scientist. Then after that, the demand planner gets to work with that, and they look at what are the outliers, what kind of explanations do we have for these outliers? Do we want to clean these from the data, yes or no? Another important part is that they look at new products that are being phased out, because those are significant changes in the demand plan. So that always takes time to review those, sometimes with marketing or sales, sometimes without. And also to look at, okay, past performance checks. Where did we perform well? Where did we not? What should we focus on for the next forecasting horizon? Now, once that is done, there's this collaboration or enrichment part that happens in a company where you want to know about what information do other departments have that will influence the demand or sales for the next periods. For instance, marketing that's doing a trade campaign, sales that's giving a discount to a certain customer on a certain product group. These things will drastically affect your demand during that period, and you want to incorporate these. After that, you typically get to some sort of consensus preparation or consensus or demand review even, where you look at what are still the gaps, what are the biggest changes that have been made, and how are we going to finalize it before the demand plan is sent to typically supply planning, because they will set inventory buffers based on the expected demand and variability, and will also start to plan their production based on this. Now, I'm not going to make any value judgment on how this process can be improved. I think there's quite some improvements possible. This is just a very generic framework, how it's being done or how companies want to do it. And I want to talk about the scope of a demand scan, because that just fully focuses on that first element, which is the demand planning baseline. Like our platform, Horizon also supports companies in the collaboration part. Planners can directly make adjustments in there. That's just not the scope of the demand scan that I'm showing you today. That's all about getting the information and history from the company in there, transforming that, and looking at which models work well on different levels and what kind of accuracy or forecast errors do we get just based on that alone. Okay. So we see that this is still running. So let me briefly touch on the maturity assessment before we look at the results together. The maturity assessment of your demand planning, but any process within your supply chain planning for that matter, is about assessing the gaps and where should you spend your time first to make improvements in your process. So typically this goes through a questionnaire that different people will fill in, different people from different angles and different levels in the hierarchy. You want to know from an executive management if they are involved and aware of what's happening. Of course, they don't know the nitty-gritty, but that's fine. That's why you also have the users fill in this questionnaire. So you get a 360 assessment of your current process and setup. Things like adherence of tasks, data quality, review meetings, all of these things you want to assess. And out of that, you get key action points. So what do you actually need to focus on first? Because you're not going to be able to fix everything immediately. So that's the one thing. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, you also want to know for these key domains, where do you compare against other companies within the industry? And this is going to be also different. I mean, depending on the kind of company that you're in, the kind of variability in your industry, the use of advanced models might or might not be so necessary. That really depends on the actual patterns in your industry. So that gives you a basis point to say, okay, where are we going to improve on next? That's something that we also do together with partners. So these partners, they offer these kinds of assessments in a very good way. So Delaware, they do that in the Benelux here, which is in Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. Demand integration does that very well in the UK. Demand management solutions also in Australia. And then Tech SCM also in Asia and India as well. We also have a partner in South America and in South Africa for these. So if you're interested, just let me know or reach out to these companies. If you want to know about the framework that I would recommend, I can also share some of that checklist with you. I don't have any problem with that either. Now, that's very briefly on the maturity assessment. So now this is almost being finalized here. As you can see, the demand scan and actual full setup. And so once this is finalized, we will have a look at that. And just for your understanding, what we're going to look at is, for all of that historical data, Horizon is going to generate a forecast with the different models for the following periods and see what the actual accuracy of that is when the new sales come in. It means that we look back, we look at January, and we see for the next couple of months, what is the forecast for these different models at the different categories. And we look at the accuracy. And that happens every time and time and time again. Because then you get a steady base of, okay, what is the approximate accuracy for these different models throughout a full year? So you have multiple points to actually base this on and to get a sense for what's possible with these models, as well as over different forecasting periods. Because you have your short-term forecast and your longer-term forecast. Longer term, of course, will be less certain, so you will have more error typically. So that's what we're going to look at. So let me refresh the data here. So now this should be loaded. Yes, okay. So this is the full demand plan, the actual forecast. We're not going to look at that right now, but we're going to go for the methods page to look at the actual results. So what I'm going to do here is select all of those past forecast dates for which all of the models have generated their forecasts, and we're going to look at the accuracies. And what you will see here in terms of actual models that we use is you don't want to be using per se hundreds of models. I mean, it doesn't make sense. There's not even that many, I would say. There are a couple of good statistical, good machine learning models, and then third category is some that we have developed in-house. By good machine learning models, I mean LGBM, XGBoost. These are examples of that, but also just an ARIMA or exponential smoothing methods like statistical models. They can also work well in businesses that are rather stable. Besides that, we have our specific models developed for intermittent and erratic demand, which is Horizon Solutions models, and also an ensemble. Ensemble models is crucial because that basically gives a weight to each different model and comes with a final forecast based on which models perform well over different periods. So it's a combination of the other best performing models, so to speak. So let me select that. And then we're going to be able to see how do these models perform for the whole past. So here we're currently looking at a lag value of 1. That means the forecast 1 month upfront. Okay, we can also look at it for 2 and 3 months upfront in this case for this company. But what we see here is for those different forecast dates, all of these models, what is their absolute percentage error? It's a measure of forecast error, so the opposite of accuracy, the inverse rather. So you can get a sense for which models are performing well. Here, of course, the lower, the better. You can also look at that in other ways. So the actual errors by clusters. A cluster means a whole product category for all locations, for all customers. How do the different models perform on that? Because you will have different business units or different channels that come with their own variability and their own trends. So different models will work better for some of these and worse for others. This is another way of visualizing it for the different lags, like 1, 2, and 3. Again, looking at the actual errors, again, a table format. And then also this is also a nice view to actually see the magnitude of these errors. Okay, so finally, if you want to look at other measures of error, that's also what's being shown here. So here we're looking at APE, MAPE, and then also TAE. So different businesses have different measures that they prefer depending on do they typically over or under forecast. These things can be easily adjusted as well, but we do provide some different ones out of the box here. Now, this all in all gives a sense for which models are performing well across the business, what kind of accuracy or rather error in this case can you expect out of the box, which can be compared to your current way of working or to your other planning tool that you might be using, and you might challenge them and tell them, look, why are we not using any of these models with these specific parameters? Because that seems to work way better than what we have right now. So it's a way to create a business case or to challenge the current way of working. And it's a very easy manner. Like you see, this took under 10 minutes to actually run it. Depends on the whole data set and the volume, of course. But it's very flexible for setting up. Now, this is the demand scan specifically. As I mentioned, the whole demand plan is actually also created from here, where you can see that for each of these products, locations, and customers that I show you before those dimensions, we can deep dive into any of these, and we get the baseline forecast based on those models that I had just shown that perform well across the business. From there, that collaboration piece can happen. From there, you can look at portfolio management to see which products are performing well or to introduce new products. All of these things can be managed from here. The Horizon platform allows also for the other parts of planning, as I mentioned, supply planning, purchase planning, S&OP reviews, but I'm not going to dive deeper into that right now. Scope for now was the demand scan to show it live, and that's what I've done. So I hope you're as excited as me about that. I think it's something really powerful, an analytics tool, but also an easy way to set up a demand planning environment, an advanced environment, in very little time. So with that, I will conclude it, and then I will take any questions that people might have. We still have about, I see, 8 minutes to go through any questions. I see there are some in the Q&A, and I see some chat, so let me open those. If you have any question, feel free to. Okay, so there's a question here in the chat: is the backbone ML or LLM? So none of this is LLM. This is not like LLMs in the tool are useful for translating insights, for getting textual inputs, but LLMs cannot go through this full data transformation part to generating those forecasts. That's not what that should currently be used for. So this is something that's, yeah, machine learning models, also statistical models, and then just a lot of automation that we've built into it with specific logic based on that data that you get from different kinds of company. So I hope that is clear to you, Mike. Also, what kind of outputs can the system generate, Excel, etc.? Yeah, so I mean, what you see here is the planning overview, or that report that can just be exported. It can be exported as an Excel, indeed, the whole plan. It can be inputted into an ERP back through an integration. That depends. Huh? Okay, so there's some other questions coming in. Let me see. Okay, so there's a question. See here in the Q&A, mention clusters. Do you compute it or just forecast at DFU level? So yeah, there's DFU, and then there's LFU, learning forecast unit level, which is, for those who don't understand it, it's a technical term to see at which level are you going to forecast it, at which level are you going to teach the models what the patterns and the trends are. You might not always do it at the lowest SKU level for one customer from one DC, because maybe you have very little data in that case. So you're going to look at across the hierarchy at the different levels, where do the models perform best? And currently, maybe your question is, yes, we compute it, we test it across the different levels and aggregate or disaggregate accordingly and look at the accuracy. All of that is not currently being shown in that overview that I showed you just now. However, that is being set up because in the backend we have all of that. We just need to find an easy way to actually convey that message to the user. Because this one, it's not built currently to be a full data science tool. It's really to get those insights and starting point for companies. The next step will also be to show all of that in more detail. So probably in August, September, we will be doing another of these where you can see the updated version, and then you will see more details about that. So a question about what is the kind of effort required in cleaning up the input data? What are some of the best practices? Okay, so again, this doesn't fully relate to this demand scan, I would say. But in terms of cleaning of outliers, that can be done automatically based on thresholds, or within the system, we also do show those outliers. So if I give you an example, Abhishek, of that in the environment that I showed you just now, you can see here that we generate planning alerts, and that also shows the actual spikes with the dynamic thresholds for the different categories at the highest level in this case. So that's a way also to look into those alerts that might need attention from planners or from the business. So that reduces the effort, but yes, there is still effort required if you want to explain outliers. If you just want to clean them, well, you just have these dynamic thresholds and they can be cleaned out. But some of these will be just random variability that you have in your business that you cannot predict. Others will be maybe actions or initiatives that were taken by your company, and you want to not just clean those, you want to know about what the actual peak was, so that if you look ahead and marketing tells you we're doing another trade campaign, you want to estimate that impact based on that previous event. So depends the effort on what you want to do with it. Let me see quite some other questions. Will the demand scan select the model that provides the least error? So the demand scan is showing the errors for the different models. In this case, it's a simplified view for all of the categories. But yes, in the actual planning overview that you see, it looks at maybe one category, the ensemble might perform the best. In another, maybe a simple moving average might actually be fine. And then that will be shown as a forecast for a planner. So they don't need to look at selecting all of those models, but they can go into that methods page to see, okay, which one is actually being selected and why. Let me see Q&A. So Victor, is a question about intermittent models, comparison with Croston's traditional model. So actually, as you see here, we don't have the Croston in here standard. However, I do think that our own intermittent is also based on that, but I can verify with Chinmay if you want, and we can come back on that. Okay, Chinmay, if you want to take that one. So the question is, how do the intermittent demand models compare to Croston's traditional model?
So Croston's traditional model tends to give an average number, and the intermittent model that we have built tries to identify when the peak will happen or when the sale will happen. So it identifies two things typically. The first is how much is the volume of the peak and when should it happen. It is not defined, not designed at all based on the Croston's initial model because it tries to average it out.
Okay, thanks. There's one other question, Chinmay, for you is also about how to identify the right aggregation level and what techniques to identify it.
So there are two ways to identify it. The first one is completely statistical, right? So your goal is to have the best forecast at say item and location level. So computationally just run forecast at all possible levels, permutations combinations, and come up with a level which provides you the least error at item location level for a given lab. That's something that we also do. The other one is understanding the business attributes and then within that identifying the right level. So within the business attributes, you could group similar patterns, similar seasonalities, similar variabilities or intermittencies. So those are business-driven clusters that we could create.
Okay, thanks. I hope that's clear. The person asking the question. So I do think that there's still some in the Q&A, but they're similar to the one in the chat. There's a question, how is the impact of cannibalization and substitution addressed? This is such a pain. Yes, Abhishek. So those dimensions about which products are still active, inactive, can also be actually mentioned for the demand planning. So this is more for the portfolio management that I very briefly touched on. I'm not going to take it right now because it doesn't relate directly to the demand scan, but if you want to talk about it, do reach out and we can give you some more details. Okay, the last minute of the webinar, so I'm taking any last question if there's anything from anybody still. Otherwise, we will conclude it. And like I said, you will also get the recording sent to you automatically. Normally, that will still happen today. If you have any questions about any of these points, whether it's a demand scan, whether it's the maturity assessment, whether it's the end-to-end planning that you want to know more about, just contact us via LinkedIn, email, via the website, whichever way you find. We're easily accessible. So don't worry about that with any kind of question that you have. Okay, I don't see any new question coming in. So with that, thank you everybody and have a great day.